Ethan Hale had never seen a sky like this before. When the transport ship left him on the surface of the new world called Velara, he stood for a long time staring upward. 3 moons floated across a dark blue sky, their pale light bending through thin clouds that looked almost silver. Strange birds with wide glowing wings cut across the air, leaving faint streaks of light behind them. The air was different here too. It tasted crisp, full of scents that were not from Earth, like flowers mixed with metal, sweet yet sharp. For a moment, Ethan forgot his exhaustion from the long journey. He simply stood still and breathed in the strange beauty. He had come to this planet because Earth had grown too crowded, too broken, and too full of rules. Velara was a chance to begin again. Humans had only just started colonizing parts of the planet, building scattered settlements where the land was friendly enough to live. Most people chose to stay near the major colonies. But Ethan had asked for something different. He wanted space, freedom, and silence. The administrators looked at him strangely when he requested the valley assignment, but they gave it to him. Now standing here, he was glad. The valley stretched wide, filled with glowing plants and rivers that shimmered under the moons. It felt untouched, like a secret waiting just for him. The transport crew unloaded his supplies quickly, eager to return to orbit before night fell. One of them, a woman with a scar across her cheek, warned him. "Don't wander after dark," she said. "Locals say things move here that don't like strangers." Ethan nodded politely, but he had heard plenty of similar warnings during training. Every new world had its myths. He wasn't worried. He had grown up in a city where danger hid around every corner. Out here, at least, the threats were honest. He could handle honest threats. When the transport lifted away and vanished into the sky, silence fell. For the first time in years, Ethan felt alone. Not lonely, but alone in a way that made his chest expand with relief. He built a small fire outside his prefabricated house and sat watching the flames. Across the valley, far away but still visible, a mountain rose like a dark tooth. Built into its side was a structure that caught his eye immediately. It was not human. Towers of black stone climbed high, lit by faint red lights. The shape of it reminded him of castles from old Earth legends, gothic and cold. His files had said nothing about neighbors. Yet there it was, a fortress glowing against the night. As he stared, a light appeared on one of the balconies. A tall figure stepped into view, almost a shadow against the moons. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Whoever lived there had seen him. For a long moment, the figure stood still, and then the light went out. The valley was dark again. Ethan told himself not to imagine ghosts. This was a planet of science and settlers, not fairy tales. Still, as he went inside to sleep, he kept thinking about that dark castle and the stranger watching from above. The next morning, the valley was bright with strange sunlight. Velara's star burned a little more golden than Earth's sun, and its warmth felt softer on his skin. Ethan spent hours unpacking his supplies, setting up power cells, water filters, and tools. He worked hard, but every time he lifted his eyes, the castle in the mountain was still there. It was impossible to ignore. His curiosity grew with every passing hour. By evening, he heard a sound at his door. Not a knock, but something softer, like a whisper. When he opened it, a small drone hovered in front of him. Its shape was elegant, unlike human designs, smooth black metal with thin silver lines. The drone projected a message in the air. The voice that spoke was clear, calm, and surprisingly gentle. "Welcome, traveler. You are new to this valley. I am Serafina of House Noctari. I invite you to visit me at my home. The night will guide your steps." The message ended, and the drone vanished into the trees as if it had melted into shadows. Ethan stood there, heart beating fast. He had not expected this. He knew the Noctari name from colony files, an ancient species said to inhabit parts of Velara, but rarely seen near human settlements. Rumors described them as proud, secretive, and dangerous. Some said they fed on life energy. Others whispered they were like the vampires of old Earth myths. Ethan did not believe in ghosts or monsters, yet something in that voice unsettled him. It was calm, but also carried a weight, like a queen speaking from a throne. For a long time, he argued with himself. The safe choice would be to stay home. Ignore the invitation, focus on his work. But Ethan had not left Earth for safety. He had come here to live. He had come to find things worth remembering. Curiosity was stronger than fear. By the time the moons rose again, he was walking toward the mountain. The path was not easy. Roots glowed faintly under his feet, and insects the size of his hand skittered away when his boots crushed the moss. The forest seemed alive in every direction, filled with soft whispers and glowing eyes. Yet none of the creatures attacked him. It was as if the valley itself allowed his passage. After an hour, the trees opened, and the castle loomed before him. Black stone walls rose higher than he expected, carved with symbols that shimmered faintly red. Tall windows glowed with firelight. A gate of iron swung open as he approached, though he saw no one there. Ethan felt a chill but kept walking. Inside, the air was cooler, filled with scents of old stone and strange flowers. A hall stretched long, lined with torches. At the far end, she stood waiting. Serafina was unlike anyone Ethan had ever seen. She was tall, her skin pale with a faint shimmer as if touched by moonlight. Her eyes glowed faintly crimson, not threatening but powerful, like embers hidden in dark stone. Her hair fell long and black over a gown that seemed woven from shadows. She did not move when he entered. She only watched, calm and still, as though she had been waiting for him all her life. "Ethan Hale," she said softly, her voice carrying through the hall. "The human from Earth, you have come." Ethan swallowed. He had never given his name. "How do you know me?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "The wind tells me. The ground whispers. This valley is mine, and nothing enters without my knowing." She stepped closer, moving with a grace that made no sound. "Do not be afraid. You are a guest here, and I do not harm my guests." Ethan forced himself to hold her gaze. "You invited me, why?" "Because," she said, "I have lived in silence for too long. And now I have a neighbor. It is unusual." She led him through the castle, showing him vast rooms filled with relics of her people, armors of black metal, paintings of stars, weapons shaped like curved spears. She spoke of her house, the Nocturi, once rulers of a great empire but now scattered, their power broken by rival clans. She did not hide the truth of what she was. "We are sustained by life," she said calmly. "Energy, essence, call it what you will. On your world they called it vampirism. But I am no mindless predator. I take only what is given, and I have learned to live with less." Ethan listened carefully. Her words should have frightened him, yet they did not. There was sadness in her tone and loneliness deeper than any he had known. He realized she was not a monster. She was someone stranded, someone who had lost a home. He thought of himself leaving Earth behind, searching for belonging. Perhaps they were not so different. When he finally left the castle that night, the moons were high. Serafina stood at the gate, watching him. "You are brave, Ethan Hale," she said softly. "Few of your kind would have come." "I didn't leave Earth to hide," he answered. Her smile returned, faint but real this time. "Then perhaps your place is here. We shall see." He walked back through the forest, heart racing. The valley no longer felt empty. He had a neighbor now, an alien princess, a vampire lady from legends watching him from her mountain. And though he should have felt fear, what he felt most was anticipation. Something had begun. Daniel stood frozen, his mind spinning. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to apologize, to vanish somehow before the alien queen could make a decision about his fate. Yet something strange held him in place. Her gaze was not threatening, but it was piercing, filled with curiosity, almost wonder. He had never felt so exposed, yet so strangely safe. He glanced around the chamber again, trying to distract himself. The walls shimmered with patterns he could not comprehend, as though the very air itself held information that danced just beyond his understanding. The floor pulsed softly under his feet, a gentle rhythm that seemed alive. Above him, the dome reflected a moving sky of colors like distant stars shifting in ways he could not explain. He had seen space countless times back on Earth, but this was something entirely different. Hello?" he said cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't know if she understood him, but he had to try something. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." The queen's head tilted, her luminous eyes studying him in silence. She didn't speak in words Daniel could comprehend, but there was a sense of attention, a pattern in her gaze that made him feel she was listening in more than one way. It was as if she were reading the intent behind his words rather than the sounds themselves. Daniel swallowed hard, forcing his shaking hands down to his sides. I was just running. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't mean to come here. I just..." His voice faltered. Then something surprising happened. She moved, rising from her platform with a grace that seemed to bend the light around her. Every motion was deliberate, slow, and fluid, yet powerful. She lowered herself to sit cross-legged on the floor in front of him, bringing her eyes level with his. Daniel's knees felt weak as he realized she was making no move to punish him. Instead, there was interest. "You are not like them," he said aloud, almost instinctively. He wasn't sure why the words came out in English. They didn't make sense in the alien tongue, but the tone of voice seemed to matter more than the words. The Queen's glowing eyes flickered briefly like a small acknowledgement. Daniel took a deep breath. He needed to find some way to explain himself. I'm just a human. I explore. I make mistakes. I learn. That's what we do." He paused, realizing how strange it must sound. "We humans, we're curious. We want to see things. We want to understand things, even if it gets us into trouble." The Queen's head tilted slightly as if considering his words. Daniel felt encouraged and stepped a little closer, speaking more confidently now. "I wasn't trying to disrespect you. I didn't know. I didn't think. I just wanted to see." She reached out a hand, delicate and almost transparent, and lightly touched a part of the glowing floor. The energy beneath her fingertips pulsed in response, spreading outward in soft waves. Daniel took a cautious step back, awed. He had read about alien technology, about intelligent beings capable of manipulating energy, but seeing it in person was breathtaking. "You can see things humans can't," he said aloud again. "You understand things differently." The Queen's eyes flickered like stars in motion. Then, as if testing him, she extended one hand toward him, palm open. Daniel hesitated, then reached out. When his hand brushed hers, he felt a warmth, not heat but a sense of connection, like the quiet hum of understanding. "You want to know," he whispered, more to himself than to her. He realized he had been talking for several minutes, spilling words without really knowing if she understood, but it didn't matter. Somehow she did. Somehow she was listening. Daniel noticed the guards outside the door had not returned. He assumed they were waiting for her signal, and in that thought, he realized something profound. She had stopped them. Not with weapons or threats, but with attention. That was power. That was authority. And she wielded it not through fear, but through her presence. He took another step closer, emboldened by her calm. "I've always wondered about other life, other minds. I wanted to see how you think, how you see the universe. Humans, we don't always understand each other, but we try. We try to learn." The Queen's glowing eyes widened slightly. For a moment, Daniel thought he had made a mistake, said something wrong, but then she moved her hands in a slow, deliberate pattern, and the air around them shimmered. The colors of the walls changed, forming shapes that mirrored his movements. It was like she was responding with a language of motion, a rhythm he could feel rather than hear. Daniel laughed softly, surprised by himself. I don't know if I can do that," he admitted, gesturing at the glowing patterns. "I mean, I can try, I guess." He raised his hands and mimicked her slow movements. The patterns shifted slightly, not perfectly, but enough that the Queen seemed to acknowledge him. She tilted her head in approval. Daniel's pulse quickened with excitement. For the first time since running through the corridors, he felt understood. He smiled. "I know I'm just a human," he said, "but we try to see, to connect. We make mistakes. Sometimes we do amazing things by accident. I think that's how we learn the most." The Queen extended a hand again, this time letting it hover near his shoulder. Daniel felt a tingling sensation, as though the energy of the chamber was wrapping around him like a gentle current. He realized that she was inviting him to stay, to share more, to teach her about this strange, fearless creature called a human. Daniel's eyes widened. He had stumbled into danger, yes, but this was something extraordinary. He was not a guest. He was not a prisoner. He was, in some strange way, a teacher and a learner at the same time. For the next few minutes, he shared small things, simple observations about human life, about Earth, about laughter, about mistakes that had led to unexpected discoveries. He told her about the stars humans saw from their tiny planet, about the way sunlight played across mountains and oceans, about the quiet moments when people felt the universe was listening to them. The Queen listened, her head tilted, her eyes reflecting the soft, shifting lights of the chamber. Daniel realized that in all his life no one had listened to him with such intensity, such focus. And yet he had never been more afraid, more aware of the consequences, more certain that he had found something rare and valuable. Time seemed to stretch. The walls shimmered, The floor pulsed, and the dome above reflected shifting constellations. Yet Daniel felt no desire to flee. He wanted to stay. He wanted to learn. He wanted to understand her as she was beginning to understand him. Finally, the Queen spoke, not in words he could understand, but in tones and vibrations, low and melodic. And Daniel understood in a way that required no language. She was curious. She wanted to know more. Daniel laughed softly, a sound of relief and wonder. I guess. We're both explorers, he said, smiling, even if we come from different worlds. The Queen's glowing eyes reflected a flicker of what seemed almost like amusement. And for the first time, Daniel realized that running from guards, stumbling into forbidden places, and risking everything had brought him to this moment. A moment where understanding, curiosity, and humanity were stronger than fear. And in that quiet, pulsing chamber, he knew that he had made a friend in the most unlikely of beings, the queen of an alien empire who had never seen anything quite like a human before. Daniel sat on the edge of the glowing platform, his legs dangling just above the shimmering floor. The Queen remained across from him, her posture calm, almost regal, but her eyes bright with curiosity. Time seemed to move differently in the chamber. Each moment stretched, filled with colors, lights, and quiet sounds that no human had ever heard before. Daniel realized he could speak freely here, without fear of interruption, without the guard's heavy footsteps echoing in his ears. I've never met anyone like you, he said softly, testing the silence. Not on Earth, not anywhere. You see things differently. You think differently. I don't even know if you can understand me, but it feels like you do. The Queen tilted her head slightly, her luminous eyes shifting like waves. Daniel smiled nervously, unsure if his words mattered, but he continued anyway. Humans are explorers, I guess. We make mistakes all the time, but we try. We try to understand, to make sense of the world even when it's confusing. I think that's kind of special. For the first time, the Queen made a sound that Daniel could almost recognize. It was not words, but a soft vibration, musical and soothing, almost like a hum. He felt it in his chest, in his bones, a warmth spreading through him. He laughed softly, surprised. So, you like humans? He asked. Or at least, one human. The Queen's eyes flickered brighter, and she leaned slightly forward. Daniel realized she was asking a question of her own. Not with words, but with the rhythm of her movements and the glow in her eyes. He paused, thinking carefully before answering. I don't know if you'd call it liking, he said slowly. I think humans, we connect. We share ideas, we learn from each other, even from mistakes. I think you're curious about us because you've never seen someone so small, yet so daring. The Queen's hand floated above the shimmering floor, tracing patterns in the air. The energy of the chamber responded to her touch, forming shapes and waves that shifted and danced. Daniel leaned closer, fascinated. I think that's amazing, he whispered. You can make the room respond to you. Humans can't do that. We have machines, but they're clumsy compared to this. He paused, noticing the subtle changes in the lights, the soft hums, the way the air seemed alive around her. It's beautiful, he said, almost to himself. It's like music that you can see. The Queen's eyes glimmered, and she repeated the gesture, this time guiding Daniel's hands. Hesitant at first, he mimicked her movements, letting the energy pulse through his fingertips. Patterns formed under his touch, imperfect but alive. The Queen tilted her head, approving, and Daniel laughed, feeling a thrill of pride. I can't believe this, he said, his voice filled with wonder. I never thought I'd be able to do something like this. It's amazing. The Queen's hand hovered near his shoulder, and he felt a gentle warmth. It was not physical, not like heat, but a feeling of connection, understanding, and trust. Daniel realized that this moment was more than learning. It was recognition. She was acknowledging his humanity, his creativity, his courage. You humans, he said, smiling. You're funny. You run into trouble, you get scared, but you keep going anyway. You try to understand, even when it doesn't make sense. I think that's why we survive. I think that's why we're special. The Queen shifted slightly, and Daniel noticed she was imitating his posture, leaning forward, her attention entirely on him. He laughed softly again, a sound of joy and relief. I know I'm small, he admitted. I know I'm not powerful like your guards, and I can't do what you do, but I can think. I can imagine. I can try things that no one expects. I think Maybe that's my strength. She responded with a wave of her hand, and the colors of the room shifted once more. The patterns in the floor pulsed, reflecting his words in light and motion. Daniel realized that she was learning from him, understanding his ideas through the energy of the chamber. Encouraged, he stood and began to walk slowly around the platform, touching the walls and lights, experimenting. Humans learn by doing, he said. We touch things, we move things, we make mistakes, and then we see what happens. It's how we understand. The Queen followed his movements, her own gestures guiding the energy in the room. Daniel felt a thrill of collaboration, as if they were dancing together, though each step was careful, deliberate, and full of discovery. He noticed that the patterns they created together were more beautiful, more complex than what either of them could do alone. He stopped and looked at her, smiling. See, that's the thing about humans. We work together even when it's hard. Even when we don't understand everything, we try. That's how we grow. The Queen's eyes glimmered, and Daniel thought he saw what looked like curiosity mixed with admiration. He realized that she, the ruler of an entire alien empire, was learning from him. A single human, small and fragile, teaching the Queen something about connection, creativity, and courage. Daniel's thoughts wandered to Earth, to the people he loved, to the stories he had read and shared. He realized that all humans carried the same spark, the desire to know, to understand, to create. And here, in this alien chamber, he was witnessing how powerful that spark could be. He knelt down on the platform, touching a pattern of glowing lines. Humans, we make mistakes, he said softly. We fall down. We get scared, but we keep going. We don't always survive, but we always try. That's who we are. The Queen moved closer, her presence comforting rather than intimidating. Daniel felt a warmth spread through him, not just from the chamber, but from the understanding that had formed between them. He was no longer just a human intruder. He was a participant, a teacher, a collaborator in this strange, luminous world. For several minutes, they moved together, creating patterns, exploring the energy of the room, sharing understanding without words. Daniel laughed, experimented, and sometimes failed. But the Queen responded with encouragement, guiding rather than correcting, observing rather than judging. Finally, he sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. I never thought I'd meet someone who could understand that, he said, his voice filled with wonder. I never thought I'd be able to share it, even with someone so different. The Queen's eyes glimmered again, and for the first time Daniel felt something that went beyond curiosity or learning. He felt respect, connection, and trust. It was a bond that needed no words, no agreements, no contracts, just understanding. Daniel smiled, feeling lighter than he had since he had been chased through the corridors. He realized that running had led him here, to the most forbidden place on the ship, but it had also led him to something extraordinary, a chance to connect, to teach, and to be seen for who he truly was. And in that moment, he knew that humans were more than what others thought. They were curious, brave in their own way, creative and capable of connecting across worlds. They could teach, they could inspire, and sometimes they could even change the minds of queens. He looked at her, feeling a quiet pride. Maybe humans aren't perfect, he said softly. But we're something. The Queen's eyes shimmered with colors that pulsed like the stars. Daniel knew she understood. And for the first time, he felt that being human, curious, daring, imperfect, was enough. Daniel sat cross-legged on the glowing platform, his eyes tracing the ever-shifting patterns in the floor. The chamber hummed softly around him, responding to the Queen's subtle movements. He had been here for hours, or perhaps it was only minutes. Time seemed different in the room, stretching and bending with the pulsing lights and the quiet hum of the energy beneath their feet. I keep thinking, he said aloud, that humans are different, but maybe we're not that different from you. The Queen tilted her head, her eyes glowing softly. Daniel hesitated, unsure if she would understand his words, but he continued anyway. We look at the world and we try to change it. We make mistakes, yes. We fail sometimes, but even in our failures we find new ways, we adapt. We imagine things that don't exist yet, and we keep trying. He paused, thinking of the people he had left behind on Earth. The friends, the families, the teachers who had encouraged him to explore and question. I think that's why humans survive, he said softly. Not because we're the strongest, not because we're the fastest, but because we learn, we connect, We imagine. The queen moved closer, and Daniel noticed that the energy in the room shifted with her. The colors grew warmer, softer, and the patterns on the floor began to mirror the rhythm of their conversation. It was as if the chamber itself was listening, responding to the ideas that Daniel shared. He smiled, feeling a thrill of hope. I think your people, your empire, you have so much potential, he said, but maybe you're missing something. You have power, yes. Knowledge, yes. But what about curiosity? What about imagination? Those things, those make humans strong in ways you might not see. The queen's glowing eyes flickered as though she were considering his words carefully. Daniel leaned forward, encouraged. I know it sounds strange. You have order, structure, tradition. That's important, I get it. But humans, we make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes, they lead to amazing things. New ideas, new ways of living, new connections. He rose to his feet and walked slowly around the platform, gesturing at the glowing walls and the shifting patterns. Look at this room, he said. It responds to you, yes, but it can respond to ideas too. It can respond to imagination. What if your people could learn to see possibilities instead of just rules? What if they could imagine new ways to live, to create, to understand each other? The queen mirrored his movements, her eyes reflecting the changing colors. Daniel felt a surge of excitement. Humans, we create art, music, stories. We ask questions that have no answers, just because we want to know. And sometimes, those questions change everything. Maybe your empire could learn from that. He paused, letting the words settle in the quiet chamber. The queen remained still, her eyes fixed on him. For a moment, Daniel worried he had spoken too boldly. He had crossed boundaries, risked offending her. But instead, she reached out a hand, letting it hover near his shoulder, the energy of the room pulsing softly in response. Daniel laughed softly, a sound of relief and joy. I know it's a lot, he said. But humans, we find ways. We connect, we imagine, we learn. That's how we survive. And maybe that's something your people can do too. The queen moved closer, and Daniel felt a warmth spread through him. Not heat, not like the sun, but a sense of understanding, connection, and trust. He realized that she was listening, not just hearing his words, but feeling them, absorbing them in a way that was almost physical. He knelt down and touched one of the glowing patterns in the floor. Look at this, he said. It responds to us. It can change. It can grow. Your people, they can be like this. Flexible, curious, imaginative. Not just powerful, not just obedient. They can learn from what humans do, from how we think, from how we make mistakes and grow from them. The queen's eyes flickered brightly, and she repeated a series of gestures, her hands moving gracefully over the glowing surface. Daniel mirrored her movements, experimenting, adjusting, exploring. Together they created patterns of light and color more intricate than either of them could have made alone. I think that's the key, he said, feeling a sense of exhilaration. Connection, curiosity, imagination, that's what makes humans special. And that's what can make your empire stronger in ways you might not expect. The queen's glow pulsed warmly, and Daniel felt a gentle hum of energy around him. He realized that she was not only listening but responding, letting him guide her understanding without forcing it. It was a lesson in trust, in creativity, in seeing the world differently. He sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. I never thought I'd be teaching a queen, he said softly, smiling. But I guess humans do strange things sometimes. We make mistakes, but we also make discoveries. The queen's hand hovered near his, and Daniel reached out, letting their fingertips brush lightly. He felt the energy of the room respond, pulsing like a heartbeat. I think your people could do amazing things, he said. If they just try, if they just imagine. For a long moment, the chamber was silent except for the soft hum of energy. Daniel realized that he had said something important, something that might change the way the queen thought about her empire. He felt a surge of pride, of hope, of the quiet certainty that humans had a power beyond what anyone had expected. Not strength, not weapons, but creativity, courage, and curiosity. Finally, the queen spoke, not in words but in vibrations, tones that Daniel felt through the floor and the air. It was a language of energy, of understanding, of agreement. He did not need to comprehend it fully to know that she had understood. She saw what he meant. She saw the possibilities. Daniel smiled, feeling a lightness he had never known. Maybe Maybe humans aren't perfect, he said softly, but we try. And trying, that can change everything. The Queen's glow pulsed in response, brighter, warmer. Daniel realized that she was not only listening but learning. She was absorbing the ideas, imagining possibilities that her people had never considered. And in that realization, he understood something profound. Humans were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most powerful, but they had something that could change worlds, the courage to imagine, to connect, and to try. He laughed softly, the sound echoing through the chamber. I never thought running away from guards would lead me here, he said. But maybe it was meant to. Maybe humans. We find our way by accident sometimes, and sometimes those accidents lead to amazing things. The Queen moved closer and Daniel felt the gentle hum of energy grow stronger. For the first time, he realized that he was no longer just a human on a strange ship. He was a bridge, a teacher, a connector. And in that quiet, glowing chamber, he felt the spark of something larger than himself. The spark of possibility, the spark of understanding, the spark that made humans. Human. He looked at her, smiling, and said softly, maybe, this is just the beginning. And in the pulse of light, in the rhythm of energy, Daniel knew it was true. This is part 4, 2,000 words narrative, focused on Daniel guiding the alien queen to see new possibilities, human creativity and imagination. Keeping the story HFY peaceful and engaging. If you want, I can now write part 5, the resolution, showing how Daniel's presence changes the Queen's view of humanity and sets the stage for humans in the alien empire, completing the story beautifully. Do you want me to continue with part 5? Absolutely. Let's complete the story with part 5 of he was running away from the alien guards and accidentally entered the alien Queen's room. This part will focus on the resolution, showing how Daniel's presence inspires the alien queen and her empire, keeping it engaging, HFY, peaceful, and in simple third-person English. Daniel sat quietly, feeling the gentle hum of the chamber surround him. The glowing patterns beneath his hands pulsed softly, reflecting the rhythm of the queen's attention. He had spent what felt like days, or maybe only hours, sharing ideas, exploring the energy of the room and revealing what made humans special. Now there was a calmness, a sense that something important had shifted. The Queen's luminous eyes rested on him, steady and thoughtful. Daniel realized that she had been thinking deeply, processing his words and the lessons of their shared time. She did not speak in words he could understand, but the vibrations in the chamber carried meaning. It was an invitation, a question, a recognition all at once. He smiled nervously. I never thought I'd be here, he admitted softly. Running away from guards, ending up in the Queen's room. I thought I was in trouble. I thought maybe this was the end, but it wasn't, not really. It's been amazing. The Queen shifted slightly and the patterns in the chamber responded, swirling and merging with the rhythm of his words. Daniel realized that she was creating a dialogue of energy, a conversation that required no translation. He could feel her understanding, her trust, and perhaps even her admiration. I think humans, we see the world differently, he continued. We make mistakes, yes, but we learn. We imagine. We connect. We take small things, ideas that seem silly, and we turn them into something bigger, and maybe that's why we survive, why we matter, even in a universe full of creatures like you. The Queen's glow intensified, a gentle warmth spreading through the room. Daniel felt it in his chest, in his fingertips, in the pulse of the floor beneath him. It was not magic. It was understanding, connection, and respect, an energy stronger than any weapon or command. Daniel's footsteps echoed against the strange metallic floor of the alien starship. He was running as fast as his legs could carry him, his lungs burning, his mind racing with panic. Behind him, the sound of heavy footsteps followed. They belonged to the alien guards, tall figures in gleaming armor whose strange language barked through the corridor like a chorus of metallic drums. Daniel didn't understand their words, but he understood the tone. It was the sound of anger and command. He had not meant to cause trouble. In truth, he had only wanted to explore. The starship was unlike anything he had ever seen. A labyrinth of glowing walls, moving panels, and light that seemed to pulse like a living heartbeat. He had been a guest, at least in name, but his human curiosity had gotten the better of him. The moment he saw a narrow door left slightly open, his instincts had whispered, What if you see something no human has ever seen before? And so, he had wandered in. Now he was paying the price. The corridor stretched endlessly, glowing lines running along the walls like rivers of energy. Daniel sprinted past doorways that slid shut as soon as he approached, as though the ship itself was alive and working against him. His breath came in ragged bursts, his heart pounding in his ears. Don't stop. Don't stop. Just keep going. The guards shouted again, their footsteps growing louder. He risked a glance over his shoulder. They were massive compared to him, taller than any basketball player he had seen back on Earth, their elongated limbs moving with surprising speed. Their eyes glowed faintly behind their helmets, and their long spears hummed with energy, casting faint ripples in the air. Daniel stumbled for a moment, nearly losing his balance before forcing himself to keep running. He tried to remember the map in his head, but the ship was too confusing. Every hallway looked the same, every glowing line a copy of the last. He turned left, then right, then down a ramp that seemed to spiral in on itself. His shoes slid against the smooth surface, and he barely caught himself before falling face first. The guards' shouts echoed closer now. Daniel's chest ached, but his fear kept him moving. Think, Daniel, think. You can't outrun them forever. Then, suddenly, he saw it, a doorway unlike the others. The walls around it shimmered with a faint golden hue, and strange symbols glowed above it, symbols he had never seen before. Unlike the cold uniform corridors, this doorway seemed important, sacred even. In his desperation, he didn't stop to think. He simply darted inside, the door sliding shut behind him with a soft hiss. Silence. Daniel stopped, leaning against the nearest wall, gasping for air. His shirt clung to his back, damp with sweat, and his legs trembled as though they no longer belonged to him. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, just long enough to try and slow his racing heart. Then he opened them again and froze. The room was vast, far larger than he had expected. The walls curved gracefully upward into a high dome that glowed with soft, shifting light. Strange patterns moved across the surface like constellations forming and dissolving in a night sky. The floor beneath him shimmered as though made of liquid crystal. Yet it held his weight firmly. In the center of the chamber was a raised platform, surrounded by long, flowing drapes of silver fabric that drifted gently as if moved by an invisible breeze. And there, upon the platform, sat a figure. She was unlike the armored guards, and unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Her form was tall, elegant, her skin a pale shade that seemed to catch the shifting light and scatter it like glass. Her eyes were large, luminous, and filled with an intelligence that pierced straight through him. A crown-like structure of delicate crystal arched around her head, glowing faintly as if alive. Every movement of her hands was graceful, as though she were part of the air itself. Daniel realized with a sinking feeling where he had stumbled. This was not a normal room. This was not just another part of the starship. He had entered the private chamber of the alien queen. The thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. His knees nearly gave out as the weight of the mistake settled in his chest. He had been running from guards, yes, but of all the places to end up, he had somehow chosen the most forbidden of all. The queen's eyes fixed on him. For a long moment, the chamber was silent except for Daniel's rapid breathing. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but the words caught in his throat. His mind screamed at him to bow, to show respect, but his body felt frozen. The silence was broken by the sound of the door sliding open behind him. The guards rushed in, their weapons raised, their voices booming with anger. Daniel flinched, ready to be dragged away. But before they could take a step closer, the queen lifted one slender hand. The entire room stilled. The guards stopped mid-step, lowering their weapons in obedience. Their glowing eyes shifted toward her, waiting for her command. Daniel stood in stunned disbelief. She had silenced them with nothing more than a gesture. Then, slowly, her gaze returned to him. Daniel swallowed hard. His legs trembled, but he forced himself to take one step forward, then another. His voice, when it finally came, was shaky but honest. I didn't mean to come here. I was just running. I didn't know. The queen tilted her head slightly, her luminous eyes studying him with a mixture of curiosity and something else he couldn't name. She spoke, her voice calm and melodic, though the words were alien to him. The sound carried through the chamber like music, rich and layered, as though more than one voice spoke at once. Daniel blinked, unable to understand, but the tone was not angry. It was questioning. "I don't know what you're saying," he admitted softly, his hands raised in a helpless gesture. "But I swear I didn't come here on purpose." For a moment he thought she might order the guards to take him away. Instead, she raised her hand again. The guards stepped back, retreating toward the door, though they kept their eyes fixed on him. With another wave, the door slid shut, leaving only Daniel and the Queen in the vast glowing chamber. The silence returned, heavy and strange. Daniel felt his throat tighten. "This is bad," he whispered to himself, barely audible. "This is so bad." Yet something in the Queen's gaze stopped him from collapsing completely. She wasn't furious. She wasn't cruel. She looked at him the way a scientist might look at a rare creature, or the way an artist might look at a new color they had never seen before. Her curiosity was sharp, alive, almost human. Daniel stood there, breathless and trembling, realizing that the strangest chase of his life had led him to a place no human had ever stood before. Alone in the chamber of an alien queen, caught between fear and awe, uncertain whether this was the beginning of his end or the beginning of something else entirely.